November 7, 1849, Chatham County, Georgia. A woman stands on an auction platform in the center of Savannah's public market. Her hands are bound with rope that has already worn the skin of her wrists raw. She is 22 years old, 5 months pregnant, and she is about to be sold for 19 cents, not $19, but 19 cents, less than the cost of a pound of coffee. The auctioneer, a man named Cyrus Feldman, holds the deed of sale in his hands, and his voice carries across the crowd with practiced efficiency. But something is wrong with this auction, something that makes even the hardened slave traders in the crowd shift uncomfortably, something that will set in motion a chain of events so disturbing that the city of Savannah will spend the next 80 years trying to erase every record of what happened that day. Tonight we reveal the truth they buried, and we will follow this woman's story to its shocking conclusion. A conclusion that involves murder, betrayal, and an act of resistance so brutal that when it was finally discovered in 1931, the authorities immediately sealed the evidence and forbade anyone from speaking about it publicly. This is the story they never wanted you to hear. Before we go any further into what happened in Savannah on that November morning, I need you to do something important. Subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that notification bell because stories like this, stories that expose the darkest chapters of American history, these are the stories that get buried, suppressed, forgotten. And I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see how far this story reaches. Let's build a community that refuses to let these truths disappear. Now, let's continue. The woman standing on that platform has a name, though it appears in official records only twice, and both times it is spelled differently. In the bill of sale from her previous owner, she is listed as Dinah. In the coroner's report filed 6 years later, she is called Diana. For our purposes, we will call her Dinah, because that is the name she used when she finally spoke. When she finally told her story to the one person who listened. Dinah was born in 1827 on a rice plantation outside Charleston, South Carolina. She never knew her father. Her mother, a woman named Patience, worked in the fields from sunrise until long after dark, her hands permanently stained green from rice stalks, her back bent from years of labor that would eventually kill her when Dinah was just 11 years old. After Patience died, Dinah was sold to a tobacco merchant in Charleston, a man named Elias Cartwright, who needed domestic help for his growing household. Elias was 43 years old, married to a woman named Constance, and father to 4 children ranging in age from 6 to 15. He was also a deacon at the First Presbyterian Church, a member of the Charleston Chamber of Commerce, and by all public accounts, a respectable businessman who treated his property, human and otherwise, with appropriate Christian values. That was the public account. The private reality was something else entirely. Dinah worked in the Cartwright household for 3 years, from age 11 to 14. She cleaned, she cooked, she cared for the younger children, she did everything that was demanded of her. And Elias Cartwright watched her. He watched her in that particular way that enslaved women learned to recognize, that predatory attention that signaled danger, that made survival require constant vigilance. When Dinah turned 14, Elias's attention became something more than watching. It became action. What happened between them, if we can even use that word, between, as though there was any equality or choice involved? What happened was rape. Systematic, repeated, sustained over years. Dinah had no power to refuse. Enslaved women had no legal right to deny their owners anything. The law did not recognize their bodily autonomy. The law considered them property, and property cannot be violated because property has no self to violate. Constance Cartwright knew. She knew because enslaved women who worked in close quarters could not hide pregnancy. She knew because Dinah's body changed in ways that made the truth unavoidable. But Constance did not confront her husband. She confronted Dinah. She accused Dinah of seduction, of tempting a good Christian man, of deliberately destroying the sanctity of a godly household. The blame in Constance's worldview lay entirely with the 16-year-old girl who had no power to say no, rather than with the 46-year-old man who had absolute power to take whatever he wanted. In March of 1843, Dinah gave birth to a daughter. The child was noticeably light-skinned, her features clearly indicating mixed parentage. Elias Cartwright refused to acknowledge the child as his. He named her Ruth, had her registered in his property ledger as the offspring of his servant Dinah, father unknown, and continued his life exactly as before. Constance demanded that Dinah and the baby be removed from the main house. They were relocated to the servants' quarters, a cramped structure behind the main residence where 6 other enslaved people lived in conditions that barely qualified as shelter. Dinah raised Ruth while continuing to work in the Cartwright household. She nursed her daughter at night after 16-hour days of labor. She sang to her in whispers, songs her own mother had sung, songs that carried memories of Africa, of freedom, of a world before chains. And she watched as Ruth grew, as the child's features became increasingly undeniable evidence of who her father was, as the resemblance to Elias Cartwright became so obvious that neighbors began to whisper, to speculate, to understand what everyone had always known but politely ignored. In 1847, when Ruth was 4 years old, Elias Cartwright sold her. He sold her to a slave trader named Marcus Pennington for $400, a standard price for a healthy child of that age. He sold her on a Tuesday morning without warning Dinah, without allowing goodbyes, without permitting the mother even a final moment with her daughter. Dinah was working in the kitchen when she heard Ruth screaming from the front of the house. By the time she ran outside, the child was already gone, loaded into a wagon that was disappearing down the street, her small hands reaching back toward the only home she had ever known. Dinah collapsed in the street. The other enslaved people in the household had to carry her inside. For 3 days she did not speak, did not eat, barely moved. She had entered a state of grief so profound that it resembled death itself, and perhaps she wished it was. But she did not die. Her body refused her that mercy. Instead, she survived, and survival meant returning to work, meant continuing to serve the man who had raped her and then sold the child born of that rape, meant functioning in a world designed to destroy her humanity piece by piece. 2 years later, in the summer of 1849, Dinah became pregnant again. The father was Elias Cartwright. There was no question about this, no ambiguity. Constance Cartwright's fury was immediate and absolute. She could tolerate one incident, one child, one public embarrassment. But a second pregnancy made the situation undeniable, made it impossible to maintain the fiction that Dinah was a seductress and Elias an innocent victim of temptation. A second pregnancy revealed the truth that Elias Cartwright was a man who repeatedly raped an enslaved woman he owned, who had been doing so for years, who showed no intention of stopping. Constance gave Elias an ultimatum. Get rid of her. I will not have that woman in my house bearing your children while I live under the same roof. Sell her, trade her, give her away. I do not care, but she leaves this household within the month, or I will make this situation public in ways that will destroy your reputation permanently. Elias understood the threat. His position in Charleston society depended on maintaining respectability. Wealthy men were expected to be discreet about their violations of enslaved women, whispered about perhaps, but never openly acknowledged. A wife publicly accusing her husband of serial rape of his property, that would cross a line that even Charleston's tolerant attitude towards slavery could not ignore. So Elias made arrangements. He contacted a business associate in Savannah, a merchant named William Hadley, who owed him money from a failed cotton investment. Elias proposed a transaction. He would forgive Hadley's debt, approximately $800, in exchange for Hadley purchasing Dinah and taking her to Savannah. Far enough from Charleston that she would never return. Far enough that Constance would never have to see her again. Far enough that Elias could pretend she had never existed. Hadley agreed. The transaction was arranged for early November during Savannah's regular public auction, where such sales occurred with administrative efficiency. But Elias added one specific condition to the sale, a condition so cruel that it reveals the depth of his vindictiveness. He set Dinah's minimum price at 19 cents. The amount was deliberate, calculated to humiliate. In 1849, the average price for an enslaved woman of childbearing age ranged from $700 to $900. A pregnant woman carrying a child who would eventually become additional property should have been valued even higher. By setting the price at 19 cents, Elias achieved several goals simultaneously. He demonstrated that Dinah had no value to him whatsoever. He ensured that she would be purchased by someone who recognized she was being offered as damaged goods, someone who would treat her accordingly. And most importantly, he guaranteed that Dinah would understand exactly how worthless he considered her, how utterly disposable she was in his eyes. William Hadley traveled to Charleston in early November to finalize the arrangement. He met with Elias in the man's study, reviewed the paperwork, signed the necessary documents. The bill of sale was meticulously prepared, listing Dinah's approximate age, her condition, pregnant, approximately 5 months, and the agreed-upon price, 19 cents. Elias Cartwright signed his name with the same pen he used to sign church documents and business contracts. His signature was neat, legible, totally unremarkable, just another transaction in a life built on transactions. Dinah was informed of the sale the night before she was to leave Charleston. She was given no choice, no opportunity to gather belongings because she had no belongings, no chance to say goodbye to the people she had lived alongside for years. She was simply property being transferred from one owner to another, and property did not require emotional consideration. The journey from Charleston to Savannah took 2 days by wagon. Hadley hired a driver, a white man named Silas Burke, who specialized in transporting human cargo. Dinah rode in the back of the wagon, her hands bound, a precaution against escape, though where would she run? 5 months pregnant in a region where every white person was empowered to stop and question any black person traveling without papers. They arrived in Savannah on November 6. The city was larger than Charleston, busier, filled with the sounds of commerce and construction. The port hummed with activity, ships loading and unloading goods from across the world, cotton and rice and tobacco flowing out, manufactured items and luxury goods flowing in, and human beings, thousands of human beings being bought and sold and traded like livestock. William Hadley took Dinah directly to the auction house, a large wooden structure near the waterfront where sales occurred 3 times weekly. The auctioneer, Cyrus Feldman, examined Dinah with the practiced eye of someone who had evaluated thousands of people for sale. He noted her age, her condition, her general health. Then he saw the bill of sale, saw the minimum price of 19 cents, and his expression changed. "Something is wrong with this one," Feldman said to Hadley. "What is it? Disease, injury, mental deficiency?" "Nothing like that," Hadley replied. "She is healthy, able to work. The child appears viable." "Then why 19 cents? The seller wanted her gone quickly. It is a personal matter, family dispute." Feldman understood immediately. This woman had done something, or had something done to her, that made her previous owner want her removed from his household. The low price was a signal, a warning to potential buyers. "This property comes with complications. You will include that in the auction description," Feldman said. "I will not misrepresent her condition and risk my reputation." Hadley agreed. He did not care how Feldman presented Dinah to the crowd. He simply wanted to complete the transaction, collect his compensation for the debt Elias had forgiven, and move on with his business. The auction was scheduled for the following morning, November 7, at 10 o'clock. Dinah spent the night in a holding cell beneath the auction house, a damp stone room where people awaiting sale were kept like animals in pens. She did not sleep. She sat with her back against the cold wall, her hands resting on her stomach, feeling the child move inside her. This child who would be born into slavery, who would never know freedom, who would belong to William Hadley or whoever purchased them at auction, who would live and die as property unless something changed, unless the entire system collapsed. And in November of 1849, that seemed as likely as the sky opening up and God himself descending to pass judgment on the men who built their fortunes on human suffering. When morning came, Dinah was brought up from the holding cell and positioned near the auction platform. She could see the crowd gathering, perhaps 60 or 70 people, some serious buyers, plantation owners and merchants, others simply spectators who attended auctions as entertainment, who watched human beings sold and found it no more morally troubling than watching cattle sold at market. Cyrus Feldman took his position on the platform. The November sun was already warm, and the air smelled of salt water and tobacco smoke. Feldman began with furniture, several chairs and a dining table from an estate sale. Then livestock, a pair of horses, some chickens. Then human beings. He sold a young man, approximately 20 years old, for $950. He sold an elderly woman, described as an excellent cook, for $300. Then he called for Dinah. She was brought onto the platform by Silas Burke, who positioned her in the center where everyone could see. Feldman read from the bill of sale in a voice that carried across the crowd. Female named Dinah, approximately 22 years of age, currently with child, estimated 5 months, experienced in domestic service, able to cook, clean, and perform household tasks. Minimum bid, 19 cents. The crowd reacted immediately. 19 cents. Someone called out, "What is wrong with her? Is she diseased?" "I am informed she is healthy," Feldman replied. The price reflects a personal matter between the seller and the property, not a deficiency in the property itself. That explanation satisfied no one. In the economy of slavery, price indicated quality. A woman offered for 19 cents must be fundamentally defective, diseased, or dangerous, or mentally unsound. No rational buyer would risk investment on someone being sold at such an insultingly low price unless they knew something others did not. Several men who had been preparing to bid immediately lost interest. They turned away, focused their attention on the next items up for auction. But 3 men remained interested. The first was William Hadley himself. He had arranged this auction specifically to acquire Dinah to fulfill his agreement with Elias Cartwright. He stood near the front of the crowd, waiting for the moment to bid. The second man was someone Hadley had never seen before, a tall, thin figure dressed in traveling clothes, standing near the back, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. The third man was local, a Savannah plantation owner named Thornton Graves. Graves owned a mid-sized cotton plantation about 15 miles outside the city, and he was known among enslaved people as one of the cruelest masters in Chatham County. His plantation had the highest mortality rate of any comparable operation, not because of accidents or disease, but because Graves worked people to death deliberately, calculating that it was more profitable to extract maximum labor over a short period than to maintain workers over decades. Graves had been watching Dinah since she appeared on the platform, and something about this situation intrigued him. A healthy pregnant woman being sold for 19 cents. That kind of opportunity did not present itself often. Are you ready to hear what I write next? This is where the story gets even darker, where we discover what Thornton Graves planned to do with Dinah, and where we meet the mysterious stranger who will change everything. Cyrus Feldman raised his hand to quiet the murmuring crowd. 19 cents, he called out. Do I have a bid of 19 cents for this property? William Hadley raised his hand immediately. 19 cents. The crowd turned to look at him. Hadley was known in Savannah, a respected merchant with legitimate business interests. His willingness to bid gave Dinah a thin veneer of credibility. If Hadley was interested, perhaps she was not as defective as the price suggested. But before Feldman could acknowledge the bid, another voice cut through the crowd. 25 cents. Everyone turned. The speaker was Thornton Graves. He stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Hadley's jaw tightened. He had not anticipated competition. 50 cents, Hadley countered. Graves smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. $1. The crowd was riveted now. 2 men bidding against each other for a woman being sold at refuse prices. This was unusual. This suggested something more.